everybody. Thank you very much for signing in and watching my live stream. I'm Mr. Matt, and this is Dr. Tot. Dr. Tot, cookie for class? Very good. And welcome to SAT, ACT Prep. We're going to continue with some miscellaneous drill sets today. These are going to occur in pairs, and we're going to get 3 exposures or 3 different sets of these pairs in the whole session. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. If you have questions at any point, then feel free to let me know either in the comment section, or you can contact me on any of my social media accounts listed in the description below. Just a disclaimer, because this is a live session, there's a little bit of a delay with the iPad, but I'll make sure to try to mitigate that. Let's go ahead and look at the first 2 questions. I'm going to give you 6 minutes. After 2 minutes, I'll start to solve to give you some hints, and then we'll go through a full solution. So number 1 says, if f of x is equal to the square root of x minus 4, quantity divided by x squared minus 5x minus 24, how many positive integers of x produce no real values for the function f of x? Number 2 asks, if x squared minus 16 is less than 0, which of the following must be true? X is less than negative 4, x is greater than negative 4, x is less than negative 4, or x is greater than negative 4, and finally negative 4 is less than x, which is less than positive 4. So I'll give you 6 minutes, and after 2 minutes I'll start to solve. Okay, so for number one, what we need to do is examine what parts of this function will produce non-real values. And there are two parts here, because there's two things, excuse me, what we're really asking is what we're not allowed to do in mathematics. In math, as long as you do the same thing to the left as you do to the right, the same thing to the numerator as you do to the denominator, there's almost an infinite amount, well, there's an infinite amount of things that you can do, but there's a few rules that you are not allowed to ever break. So for example, you are not allowed to divide by 0. So any value for x that will produce a result of 0 for that trinomial in the denominator, x squared minus 5x minus 24, anything that makes that 0 will produce an undefined answer or a non-real value as an answer. The same thing is true for the numerator. Any value that makes that radicand, that expression underneath the radical sign x minus 4, less than 0, anything that makes it negative will also produce a non-real value, because then you're talking about imaginary numbers. You're not allowed to take the square root of a negative number. That's why we have I. We factor out an I, and we'll get to that at some point as well. But the short of it is we can't have anything negative underneath the radical sign. So any value for the input of x that's going to make that expression x minus 4 less than 0, or in other words negative, is going to make that a non-real value. So we need to examine two things for number one. Any value that will make x minus 4 less than 0 or negative will not be a real output. And any value that makes the trinomial in the denominator, x squared minus 5x minus 24, equal to 0, will also not produce a non-real output, because you're not allowed to divide by 0. So for x minus 4 less than 0, if we just add 4 to both sides, we get the solution set x is less than 4. There are 3 positive integers, and they say positive integers in the question. So we're talking about whole numbers greater than 0. There are 3 whole numbers greater than 0 that would qualify or be satisfied by this inequality. Positive 1, positive 2, and positive 3. We can't use positive 4 because x has to be less than positive 4, not less than or equal to. So far, by the first condition, we have 1, 2, and 3 will produce non-real values. For the second condition in the denominator, if you set that trinomial x squared minus 5x minus 24, set that equal to 0, and then factor in order to solve. 2 factors of the c value, 24, that add together to get the b value of negative 5 would be excuse me, I got the wrong signs there. It should be negative 8 and positive 3 to produce a positive 5. So that means that x is equal to positive 8 and negative 3. Fortunately, it doesn't change the solution set, because we're still, all the same solutions were accounted for in the first condition. So any number that makes the denominator equal to 0, namely positive 8 or negative 3, will produce a non-real output. So if we count all of these guys up, and notice that the answer for negative 3 doesn't count because we can only use positive integers. They say that directly in the question. So as a result, we'll have non-real values when x is equal to positive 1, positive 2, and positive 3. So that's a total of 3 values that will produce non-real outputs. So the answer to number 1 is 3. For number 2, we need to solve this inequality, x squared minus 16 is less than 0. So the tricky part here is that squared. When we undo a square, we need to do the opposite operation, which is square rooting. But when we square root on both sides of an equation, we have to consider the negative and the positive result, right? Because there's a mathematical phenomena that occurs when squaring. Squaring will, raising a value, any number, to an even exponent will always eliminate the negativity. So when you do the opposite operation, you have to take that into consideration. So for example, negative 3 squared is positive 9. Positive 3 squared is also positive 9. So when we square root 9, we have to take that into consideration, which is why when we square root on both sides, we take the positive and the negative outputs. Because both options, when we were to, in the first place, would work. So when we undo the operation, we have to take that into consideration. So when we square root for number 2, we're going to have to consider the positive and the negative outputs. For an inequality, remember that when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip the direction of the inequality sign around. When you consider the negative output, that's the same thing, or that can be thought of as the same thing as dividing or multiplying by a negative number. So when we consider the negative in the second equation that this turns into, when we have x squared minus 16 is less than 0, if we add 16 to both sides, I'm in the problem that I wrote in green ink. When we add 16 to both sides, we get x squared is less than 16. And then I'm going to have to take the square root. That's when I broke that equation into two different variants. One is considering the positive, which is basically just leaving it alone. And when I take the square root of both sides, I get x is less than 4, because the square root of 16 is 4. But when I consider the negative output, I'm going to have x is greater than negative 4, because I have to flip the direction of that inequality sign. Putting that all together, notice that inequalities can throw some students off. This second inequality, notice I can take that off the page and rotate it around and put it back, and it's exactly the same statement as long as I keep the direction of the inequality sign consistent. Notice that x greater than negative 4 is the same exact thing as negative 4 is less than x, and I'll write that in blue ink here. So that allows you to clearly put these two parts of the inequalities together into a compound inequality. So negative 4 is less than x, which is less than positive 4. This guy is going here, and then this guy is going on the left. So the answer to number 2 was answer selection D. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at the next two problems. So question number 3 says, if f of x is equal to the square root of x minus 2 quantity divided by x squared minus x minus 20, how many positive integers of x produce no real values for the function f of x? Question number 4 asks, if x squared minus 36 is less than 0, which of the following must be true? X is less than negative 6, x is greater than negative 6, x is less than negative 6, or x is greater than negative 6, and finally, negative 6 is less than x, which is less than positive 6. I'll give you 6 minutes. After 2 minutes, I'll start to solve. Okay, so for number 3, for this function, any value that makes x minus 2 in the numerator, the radicand underneath of that radical sign, less than 0, or in other words, negative, will produce a non-real value. And any value for x that makes the denominator, that trinomial in the denominator, equal to 0, will also produce non-real values, because you're not allowed to take the square root of a negative number, and you're not allowed to divide by 0. So we're going to test which values, which inputs of x will produce those conditions. So if we take x minus 2 and set it less than 0, that's testing which inputs for x will produce negative values. Adding 2 to both sides from x minus 2, we're going to get x is less than positive 2. There's only one positive integer less than positive 2, and that's positive 1. So we have one integer from the numerator that will exhibit that characteristic, or produce that characteristic, produce a non-real value. For the denominator, if we factor x squared minus x minus 20, we're looking for two factors of 20, the c value, that will produce the b value of negative 1. So negative 5 and positive 4 will produce a negative 1. Setting them both equal to 0 using the principle of zero products, we'll find that x minus 5 is equal to 0 and x plus 4 is equal to 0. Adding 5, we get x is equal to positive 5. Subtracting 4 in the other equation, we get x is equal to negative 4. But remember, the question asks only about positive integers, so negative 4 doesn't count. So we have x is equal to positive 1 and x is equal to positive 5 as producing non-real values in the function f of x. So the answer to 3 is 2. There are two positive integers that will produce non-real values. For number 4, if we take x squared minus 36 is less than 0, first thing, we're just solving for x here. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides and get x squared is less than 36. Now, in order to take the square root, I need to consider the positive and the negative result. When we consider the negative result, remember that that can be considered the same thing as multiplying or dividing by negative 1. So when we have an inequality, you have to make sure that you flip the direction of the inequality sign around when you're considering the negative output. So we have x is less than the positive square root of 36, and we have x is greater than the negative square root of 36. The square root of 36 is 6, so we're going to have x is less than positive 6, and we're going to have x is greater than negative 6. To make that second inequality make a little bit more sense, you can literally imagine picking the inequality up and flipping it around and then plopping it back down on the paper. So notice that x greater than negative 6 is the same exact thing as negative 6 less than x. And that allows you to put that to the left because negative 6 is the lower bound of this compound inequality, and allows you to take that first equation with the positive 6 and put it to the right, both sharing the x in the middle. So your answer here is going to be negative 6 is less than x, which is less than positive 6. If you have any questions, then please let me know in the comments below or hit me up on the social media accounts. Otherwise, let's take a look at 5 and 6. So question number 5 asks, if f of x is equal to the square root of x minus 4, quantity divided by x squared minus 4x minus 21, how many positive integers of x produce no real values for the function f of x? Question 6 asks, if x squared minus 49 is less than 0, which of the following must be true? X is less than negative 7, x is greater than negative 7, x is less than negative 7, or x is greater than negative 7, and finally, negative 7 is less than x, which is less than positive 7. I'll give you 6 minutes, and 2 minutes in, I'll start to solve. Okay, so for number 5, we're looking for any input that's going to produce a negative value for x minus 4. So if we take the expression x minus 4 and set it less than 0, that's the condition that makes a number negative. So this overall function will have non-real values whenever x minus 4 is less than 0. And whenever that denominator is equal to 0. So we take x squared minus 4x minus 21 and set it equal to 0. For the first inequality, x minus 4 less than 0, adding 4 on both sides, we get x is less than positive 4. There are 3 integers, positive integers, less than positive 4. Positive 1, positive 2, and positive 3. So we have 3 values for the numerator that will produce non-real numbers, non-real outputs. For the denominator, if we set it equal to 0, looking for 2 factors of 21 that add together to get negative 4, that's going to be negative 7 and positive 3. So we get x minus 7 times x plus 3 is equal to 0. Using the principle of zero products, we can set each of those factors equal to 0 in order to solve. So we can set x minus 7 equal to 0 and x plus 3 equal to 0, solving for x is equal to positive 7 and x is equal to negative 3. But remember that the domain of the answer has to be positive because they explicitly say that in the question. So they say how many positive integers of x. So we can't count negative 3, but we can count positive 7. So we have a total of 4 positive integers that produce non-real outputs in this function f of x. For number 6, if we take x squared minus 49 less than 0 and solve for x, we're first going to add 49 to both sides. So we get x squared is less than 49. Then we need to take the square root. Remember, when we take the square root, we have to consider the positive and the negative outputs. When we're dealing with an inequality when we're doing that, that practically means that when we consider the negative output, we have to flip the direction of the inequality sign. So the positive version, the version that's on the left, x is less than positive the positive square root of 49. That's basically just evaluating it as you normally would think you should. So x is less than positive 7. Nothing really changed. You just took the square root of both sides. For the negative, however, you have to flip the direction of the inequality sign. So it's not going to be x is less than the negative square root of 49. It's going to be x is greater than the negative square root of 49. The square root of 49 is 7, so negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. So we're going to get x is greater than negative 7. X being greater than negative 7, because negative 7 is the lower bound of this in this inequality, doesn't make as much sense to think about as if we were to flip it around. So if we just take that inequality on the right, x greater than negative 7, pick it off the page, flip it around, and put it back on the page, you would get negative 7 less than x. Notice how I'm maintaining the direction of the inequality sign. That inequality sign was opening towards the mouth of the inequality sign was opening towards the x in the first version. And even though the x and the negative 7 switch sides, it's still opening towards the x in the second version. That allows me to more easily see how I can put these two together, sharing the x in the middle. So I'm going to get the compound inequality solution set of negative 7 is less than x, which is less than positive 7. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's go on to 2 different problems. Totally different. So question number 7. 3 points, x, which is 1, 1, y, which is 4, 4, and z, which is 6, 2, are in the xy plane. If line segment xy is the diameter of circle A, and line segment yz is the diameter of circle B, what is the slope of the line that passes through the center of both circle A and circle B? And question 8 asks, at the sales department of company XYZ, 50 workers are either paid $125 per day or $155 per day, depending on their level of experience. If the average of all the workers' pay is $134 per day, how many workers earn $125 per day? And the answer selections there: A15, B25, C35, and D45. So I'll give you 6 minutes. After 2 minutes, I'll start to solve. Okay, so if we look at 7 and 8, so I drew a rough sketch here, not really paying attention to be exact with the points, but just to get an overview of what these different line segments look like. So if we have these 3 points, 1, 1, 4, 4, and 6, 2, these represent the diameters of these 2 circles. So I just plotted them out, and the center, ultimately we're looking for the slope of the line that goes through the center of the 2 circles. So the first thing is that we need to find the center. The center of the diameter is going to be the midpoint between the 2 ends. The midpoint formula is just the sum of the x-coordinates divided by 2, comma, the sum of the y-coordinates divided by 2. So if we take 1 plus 4, which is 5, divided by 2, we get 2.5. So the coordinates for the first midpoint, or the first center, the center of circle A, would be 2.5, comma, 2.5. For circle B, if we take 6 plus 4, the x-coordinates, we get 10, divided by 2 would be an x-coordinate of 5 for the midpoint. For the y-coordinates, we get 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I'm just taking the average of the x-coordinates and then the average of the y-coordinates to find the midpoint. So we're trying to find the slope of the points 2.5, 2.5 and 5, 3. So if I put that into the slope formula, I'm going to get 3 minus 2.5 divided by 5 minus 2.5. 3 minus 2.5 is 0.5. And 5 minus 2.5 is 2.5. 0.5 goes into 0.5 one time. 0.5 goes into 2.5 5 times. So this will actually simplify into a slope of 1/5. So the answer to number 7 is 1/5. For number 8, this is a twist on an average. Well, it is an average question, but it's not using the standard formula for an average. We know to calculate the average of any set of values, we take the sum divided by the number of terms. So an average is always equal to the sum divided by n, sum, the total divided by the number of terms. Notice, though, that I can manipulate that formula. If I multiply by n on both sides, that second line in blue shows you the corollary to that average formula. So the average times the number of terms will always produce the sum or the total number of whatever you're talking about. So here they told us that the average of all the workers is $134 per day, and we know that there's 50 workers. So we know that in total, every day, all of the workers are making $6,700. So there's $6,700 to account for. But the problem is that we only have enough information to write one equation, right? We only have enough information about the sum of these 2 different types of workers. We know that the 125 salaried worker plus the 155 salaried workers equal a total of $6,700 per day. But we can't write any other equation relevant to these 2 unknowns, and there are 2 unknowns. You have to have at least as many mathematical statements. You have to have at least as many mathematical equations as you do unknown variables in order to solve explicitly. To solve explicitly means you're solving for an actual number, not like in terms of another variable. So here we actually, if you look at your answer selections, they are numbers. So we have to be able to solve explicitly here. So the way around this, even though we have 2 unknowns, because the number of 125 salaried workers does not have to be the same as the $155 salaried workers. There's no reason why they have to be the same. But if we let x represent one of them, let's say here I said the x represents the number of workers who make $125 a day, then we know 50 minus x, the total number of workers, 50, minus the number that make $125 a day, must be the same as the number of workers who make $155 a day, because it's a bifurcated situation. There's only 125 and 155 a day workers. There's nothing else for the missing part to be. So we can set up an equation saying that $125 times X, the number of workers who make $125, plus $155 times the quantity of 50 minus X, the total number of workers minus the number of workers who make $125. That should be equivalent or should represent the number of workers who make $155, is equal to 6,700. You just need to make sure that when you multiply that 155 through, that it gets distributed to both values inside the parentheses. So you need to do 155 times 50, which is 7,750, and 155 times negative x, which is going to be negative 155x. I first subtracted that 7,750 on both sides, so I got 125x minus 155x is equal to negative 1,050. 125x minus 155x is going to give you a negative 30x. So negative 30x is equal to negative 1,050. Dividing by negative 30 on both sides, you'll find that x is equal to 35. Always go back to check that x is what they're actually asking us for. So they want to know how many workers earn $125 per day. We defined x to be the number of workers that make 125. If you chose x to represent the number of workers that make $155 a day, which would be perfectly fine, that's not wrong, you just have to be able to interpret your answer. In that case, you would have to substitute back in for that expression of 50 minus x, right? Because that's not the same. So it depends on what you choose as your unknown variable. If you chose x to be the number of 125 workers, then you're fine. But if you chose x to be the number of 155 a day workers, then you need to sub back in to solve for the other number of workers, the workers who make 125 a day. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at 9 and 10. So question number 9 asks, 3 points, x, which is 1, 3, y, which is 5, 5, and z, which is 7, 3, are in the xy plane. If line segment xy is the diameter of circle A, and line segment yz is the diameter of circle B, what is the slope of the line that passes through the center of both circle A and circle B? Question number 10 asks, at the sales department of company XYZ, 50 workers are either paid $150 per day or $200 per day, depending on their level of experience. If the average of all the workers' pay is $188 per day, how many workers earn $150 per day? A is 12, B is 24, C is 36, and D is 48. I'll give you 6 minutes, and after 2 minutes, I'll start to solve. Okay, so for number 9, if we roughly plot out or draw a diagram there, you can see how where the first diameter and second diameter lie in a XY grid. And then you're going to take the average of the endpoint. So to find the center of these circles, I'm just taking the x coordinates. So for x and y, I'm taking 1 and 5. If you add them up, divide by 2, you're taking the average of the x coordinate, average of the y coordinates. So 1 plus 5 is 6, divided by 2 is 3. And then 3 plus 5 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. So the midpoint, or the center of that first circle, circle A, is 3, 4. Taking the last 2 points, which represent the endpoints of this diameter of circle B, and calculating the average of the x and y coordinates, we're going to have 5 plus 7, which is 12, divided by 2, which is 6. And for the y coordinate, 5 plus 3 is 8, divided by 2, which is 4. So the center of circle B would be 6, 4. Notice that the centers have the same y coordinates. So that means that this line that goes from one center to the other is horizontal. So this is actually going to have a slope of 0 because it's a horizontal line. And if you wanted to go about calculating that, you just take y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. y2 is 4. y1 is 4, 4 minus 4 is 0, so 0 divided by anything is just 0. So the slope, the answer to number 1 was 0. Number 9. The answer to number 9 was 0. For number 10, we're going to use the corollary to the average formula. We know that an average is equal to the sum divided by the number of terms. But we also know that the average times the number of terms will always give you the total or the sum value of whatever you're talking about. So here, if they tell us that the average amount or the average pay of all the workers is $188 per day, then we know that 50 times the average, the number of workers, 50, times the average of the workers' pay, 188, is equal to 9,400. So every day, all 50 of these workers earn a total of $9,400 cumulatively, all together. But how does this split between the two levels of pay? Well, if we let x, the unknown, if we let x equal to the number of workers who make $150 a day, then we can write 50 minus x to represent the number of workers who make $200 a day, basically everybody else. Notice that if there was another level of pay that we didn't know, the number of employees for which receive that amount of pay, this problem would not be able to be solved. It's only because there's a missing component, there's only one missing component, and we know the total sum. So we know that if there's x number of workers making $150 a day, 50 minus x, the total number of workers minus the number of workers who make $150, has to equal the number of workers who make $200 a day. So we can write an equation setting it equal to the sum or the total cumulative amount of money earned every day. $150 times x plus $200 times 50 minus x workers is equal to 9,400. Just make sure that you distribute that 200 inside the parentheses. 200 times 50 is equal to 10,000. 200 times negative x is equal to negative 200x. So we can combine the 150x and the negative 200x to give you a negative 50x. So we have negative 50x plus 10,000 is equal to 9,400. Subtracting 10,000 on both sides, we're going to get negative 50x is equal to negative 600. And dividing by negative 50 on both sides, you'll find that x is equal to 12. So the answer to number 9 was 0. The answer to number 10 was A, 12. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at the last two problems, and these problems will bring us up to the end of class today. So question number 11, 3 points, x, which is at 1, 3, y, which is at 5, 1, and z, which is at 3, 5, are in the xy plane. If line segment xy is the diameter of circle A and line segment yz is the diameter of circle B, What is the slope of the line that passes through the center of both circle A and circle B? Question 12 asks, at the sales department of company XYZ, 50 workers are either paid $175 per day or $250 per day, depending on their level of experience. If the average of all the workers' pay is $224.50 per day, how many workers earn $175 per day? I'll give you 6 minutes, and after 2, I'll start to solve. Okay, so for number 11, if we roughly sketch this out, this is really helpful if you do this because it can be a little bit confusing what lines to connect. If you connected, for example, if you just look at the coordinates, it might be tempting to connect x with z because they're closer together, but that's not how it's listed here. So make sure that you get the diameters right. Taking the midpoint of 1, 3 and 5, 1, 1 plus 5 is 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the x-coordinate of that center is 3. The y-coordinates, 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the midpoint of the first diameter and the center of circle A is going to be 3, 2. For circle B, we have x-coordinates of the endpoints of the diameter as 3 and 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. We have y-coordinates of 5 and 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the center of circle B is going to be 4, 3. Solving for the slope between these 2 points, we're going to have y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is 2, divided by x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. 4 minus 3 is also 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. So the slope and answer to number 11 is 1. If we know for number 12 that the average of all the workers is $224.50, and we know that there's a total of 50 workers, then we can take the average times the number and in order to calculate the total sum, the cumulative sum of dollars earned by all workers every day. So 224.5 times 50 is going to give us a total sum of $11,225 every day, which allows us to write a sum equation using only one variable. Let's choose x to represent the number of workers who make $175 a day, and therefore we can write the expression of 50 minus x, the total minus the 175 workers, must be equal to the $250 workers. So, writing the equation 175x plus 250 times the quantity 50 minus x is equal to 11,225. Making sure to distribute the 250 within the parentheses. 250 times 50 is 12,500. 250 times negative x is going to be negative 250x. So now we can expand that first equation into 175x plus 12,500 minus 250x is equal to 11,225. I can combine the positive 175x with the negative 250x, giving me a negative 75x. And then I can also subtract 12,500 on both sides. So that leaves me with negative 75x is equal to negative 1,275. And finally, dividing on both sides by negative 75, I'm going to find that x is equal to 17. Make sure that x is actually what they're asking you for. So they want to know how many workers earn $175 per day. We defined x to be the number of workers that earned 175. If it was the other class, we'd have to substitute it back into the expression that we used to represent the 175. So always, always, always go back and check that the value that you saw for x represents what the question is actually asking you. They love to go back and change, have you go through a long drawn out calculation, multi-step calculation, where you're finally at the end and you finally get x, but they're not actually asking you for x, they're asking you for a different characteristic that involves x. Okay? If you have any questions, then please let me know or get in contact with me. If you find these videos helpful, then please like and subscribe and share with your friends. I appreciate it very much, and welcome to all the new subscribers. And Dr. Tot, do you want to say goodbye to everybody? Say, not really, I'm kind of tired, but come on, let's say goodbye. Yawning. Can you say bye for a cookie? Bye? A little bit better? Okay, a little bit. All right. Thank you guys very much. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.